Hey, Carla.
Hey, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you doing?
I was looking for my mute button. I was like, I gotta find that mute button.
I understand.
Yeah, I was like, let me log on now because in 10 minutes I will forget and
Mm-hmm.
miss the whole meeting.
That is me.
Yes, you doing all right?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How
How's it?
about
We're good. A couple of counties are out with their school districts, but other than that, my numbers are pretty good.
good? Well, we thought we were going to be virtual. I mean, I'd gone as far as to email Lauren, our program specialist, and tell her I thought we were going to be virtual, but we did not follow the recommendation. So we are still in person.
Yes, there are several that didn't follow the recommendation. So. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm good. Thank you.
Good, good, good. I'm just ready to start planning for next year. I know that's crazy, but I'm ready to figure out what we're going to be doing.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Hey, Lori, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? Currently quarantined, but I'm good.
Sorry, anything we can do for you?
No, I've just been working from home and I've had plenty to do. So I personally don't have it. I just was exposed again.
Gotcha.
So we've been pretty fortunate with no kids have got it to this point and only a few of the Head Start staff. So we've been in pretty good shape so far.
That is good.
Yeah, definitely. What about you? How's it going?
We have had several staff and several students test positive and have to quarantine classrooms, but
Okay.
we are the contact tracers trace all the students back to outside of school, and our staff as well. So none of it has been within the building. So, but it's still hard. I mean, we don't have any subs. So when a class goes down, obviously it's the entire class, but um, we don't have anybody to help. But I don't blame subs. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah. And well, we've been pretty fortunate. We hired a lot of extra, back in August to help out because we're not sending any extra staff to cover centers like we used to. Like if
yeah,
you're not already at that center, you don't, you don't send them.
right. We've had to do some creative things as far as lunch breaks, because we're not cross-contaminating classrooms. So if the lunch break sub is out, then those staff members just get to leave early. Like we'll give them a break during the day just to breathe. But then if they don't get their duty-free lunch, then they just leave 30 minutes early, which sometimes they like that better than actually the lunch break in the middle of the day.
Yeah. Right. Right. Definitely.
Hey, Jessica. Hey, Tammy. Happy Monday.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, girl.
I'm trying to feed my face before the meeting.
Understand. Oh,
Good
that's
morning, all.
hey, Tammy.
Kristy, I didn't get to listen to the whole thing, but I did talk to James afterward. I think it was really helpful, just getting some information on each program and what's going on. Very, very helpful. I appreciate that. We've kind of had that question in the back of our mind, for a month, like how's it going for other places and what's going
Right.
on. So that
Well,
was
thank you for that feedback. It means a lot. I appreciate everybody sharing, because there's not a wrong answer. We have to do what's best for our community, and we're so different
right.
that literally, just one county over can be completely different. I'll say our virtual teachers are doing a great job. It is amazing to me how engaged some of our students and families have been. And I've said it 100. I hope that we are recreating Head Start options for families.
Right.
want to stay home with their babies. I mean, I think it's totally fine to do it this way, especially when the data is showing that they're doing a good job. So
Yeah, definitely. I know Jessica talked to my staff last week about how they're doing virtual, and
Hello.
pretty helpful. So
yeah.
Hey, John.
Let me turn this fan off. It's gonna.
We can't hear your fan, John, if you need to keep it on.
Oh no, I didn't want it moving in the background.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, it sort of moves up there.
I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've done some Zooms with our Rotary.
Yep.
That's how we're meeting, and several of them get on me about that. They say it's too distracting. I'm like, well, this is where I am.
Until you said something. Now I'll pay attention to it.
And now you're always going to watch for it.
Yeah.
That's like people trying to walk around and have their video on and talk also. That's really like, I have to like turn away from it. It gives me like vertigo really bad.
I completely understand.
Hey gang, well, we'll wait a few more minutes and make sure who we've got on here. I was really excited, Kristy, at your suggestion, we were able to get Heather to come on and join us today to address some of the concerns that folks have shared. So awesome. I'll go over that survey just very briefly. I've already sent a copy of those responses to Heather so that she sort of has a feel for what the concerns of folks are. And then I'm sorry if some folks filled it out and then didn't see their results. I know Cindy had that problem. Kristy, you said you had that problem. I think that might have stemmed from about 5 minutes after I sent it out. I read the last question and realized that I left a word or two out. So I went in to edit that question. And I'm afraid that it messed people up who had received the email, opened the email, and were completing the survey at the moment that I was trying to edit the survey. So
no worries.
That being said, I think we've gotten a really good feel, I think, for where programs are. It was a diverse group that responded from around the state. So we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, how are you?
We're doing well. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Is Heather going to be getting on as well?
I'm sitting in for Lori Walsing. She should be, that's okay. She should be checking in. I'm not 100% sure, but.
All right. My mistake.
Oh, that's okay.
Look at the listing here. All right. So we'll give that a few more minutes. So did everyone weather the cool weekend?
It was wonderful.
Yeah, it was kind of nice. Got that extra hour, always good. Doesn't feel like an extra hour though. Soon we'll all be going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark. So that's certainly the case on Eastern time. There's Heather. I'll wait for her to get logged in. See, Kristy, she turned her fan off as well. All right, Heather, can you hear me?
Make sure I'm not on mute. Yes, I can hear you.
There you are. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Yes, good morning. Well, good afternoon.
Yeah, we really appreciate you making time. I know it was sort of short notice, and I thought we had a 50-50 chance. So I'm so glad that you were able to come in and join us. Let's go ahead and get started. I promised Heather that this conversation would last no more than 60 minutes because she has a very busy schedule, and I know the rest of you do as well. Many thanks to those that were able to complete the survey that went out the middle of last week, asking questions of you and your program, specifically about how you're dealing with the COVID-19 impacts and how it's sort of impacting your program, helping your program, hurting your program, sort of all of those questions. I sent a summary of that to each of you this morning. And if you have not had a chance to go over it, I won't go over it word for word, but right now it looks like programs on average are about 22% under enrolled based on the figures. As far as in person, about 64% of those that are participating are doing so in person, and then 36% are virtual. I think that what we are seeing is increasing, and this seems to be a bit of the trend that we're hearing from programs week to week, is that more virtual is coming. Folks are sort of closing some classrooms, going more to virtual. General trends they're seeing, folks are not enrolling. People are citing COVID as a major concern for that from a parental perspective. But the programs that are going 4 and 5 days a week, particularly 5 days a week, are seeing good enrollment numbers. So there certainly is a need and demand there for that. The question around local health departments seems to be about 50-50. Some folks are saying they're having really great relationships with their health departments, no problems, no challenges, good guidance. On the other hand, we've got folks that are saying they're unable to get in contact with their health department, unable to get appropriate responses. And so that's a bit of a frustration for them. Let's see, programs, supports needed or concerns that your program has. There are several questions here that I think we can go over today, and that'll be part of our conversation with Heather. And then also what you're looking for from Region 4 is a question. Overall, I think it was about 60-40 in terms of PPE. Folks saying that they had good access, good supplies, good reserves, and then about 60% of folks saying that they're sort of dwindling in their reserves and they're oftentimes having difficulty finding appropriate PPE. So other than that, like I said, I sent Heather a copy of this earlier to give her a flavor of some of the concerns that you have shared and expressed. So with that, Kristy, I want to ask, is there anything that you'd like to say at the outset? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Heather and our group.
Yes, no, Heather, I just want to thank you for your time today. And fellow directors, I just want to really encourage you. This week is going to be a stressful week all around. Some people get stressed out by election results. Some people get stressed out just by what's going on in COVID. So please, please remember to take care of you. Self-care, whatever that looks like. Get out, and it's beautiful here in Paducah. So we're going to get out as a staff and do some walking this afternoon. So please take time to get away from technology. Make sure you're taking those tech breaks because you need it as much as your staff does. So that's my tip for today. Just a mindful Monday, and take time for yourself this week and get out and vote, whatever that might look like. So, but
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, there were some requests last week and suggestions that we be in touch with Heather and ask her to join us today. So Heather, again, thank you so very much for making time. And I know you may have a couple of other folks on the call with you. So I want to kind of turn it over to you for a few comments. And then I know that our participants all have really great questions for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. I do want to say that I had to, knowing what the topic was, had to bring reinforcements in, knowing that it would be difficult conversations. So I brought in Amanda Bryans. You guys probably know her, probably better than you all know me. Because Amanda has been around for quite a number of years with the Office of Head Start, really supporting our education component of service delivery. And so I know she's been involved in numerous conversations that we're having within the Office of Head Start as we're talking about how to best support, grantees, service delivery, just some of these conversations that we're having, and just being a part of that. So I wanted to welcome Amanda also to the conversation, because I think she can definitely help support and answer questions that you all may have. I just moments ago just sent Amanda the survey as well, and just some interesting information. And Amanda, I'm not sure if you had any opening comments or anything that you wanted to make, but I just wanted to jump in because I know that there was some burning questions, and it seemed like, if you guys don't mind me reacting to some of just the enrollment concerns and questions that folks have had, because even internally we were having discussions about, what is the perceived messaging that we are putting out there to our grantees when it comes to enrollment? Because I know we've paused the full enrollment initiative. We've really, put out there that we are really wanting programs. While we don't want you to throw all of your recruitment and enrollment efforts out the window, but we really want to make sure that you're not feeling that pressure to try to fill those enrollment slots if you've done, if you've gone out there and you have families that just are concerned, they're not comfortable with the service delivery, or you just don't have the capacity any longer to do that. I want to just be able to reiterate the message and just consistently reinforce that we understand that. We've done all that we can to hopefully message that out to you all. So I don't want you to feel overly anxious or concerned that there's going to be a weight over your head, that we're going to come back and there's going to be some penalization or something because you weren't able to achieve full enrollment this year. So we get that. I think that's why we're collecting the center's data. We're seeing that information come in. While the center's data collection doesn't tell us why there's an under enrollment issue, it could be capacity, it could be the families are not interested in services right now. So it doesn't tell us the why, but we know that it exists. And so that's okay. We understand that, as long as, like I said, you're continuing with those efforts, but I hate to use the word, just don't kill yourself, over it. It's not worth the stress and added pressure. I mean, how about this? I know all programs are super amazing and you all strive to do the best that you can. And I think sometimes we just have to live with it's the okay. It's okay to let some things, to let go of some of that stress, because it's not worth the constant, hitting up against the wall. So I don't know, Amanda, if you have a nicer way to articulate that, but that's kind of what I wanted to jump out there and say.
Thanks, Heather. I think you said it really well. I think it's almost impossible to believe, because Heather and I are speaking on behalf of the bureaucracy, the federal government, and our role is kind of all the words about accountability and things like that, but that's not what we're worried about right now. We understand that. I hear my colleague Marco in my ears all the time saying, it's a pandemic. Like, nothing is regular. What we're worried about is, and it's the same things that I was a Head Start director for a number of years, and what keeps you up at night? Like, is there a family who's hungry because they can't get to a food bank and they can't be in person? Is there a family whose child is really at risk because they didn't get immunizations? Because in the spring, so many doctors' offices weren't able to serve young children, and the family's they're not certain about getting back on a schedule for vaccines, and so somebody's at risk. Or are there families that are in dire straits because of new or existing domestic violence or things like that? So I think for us, it's more about how you're able to continue being the kind of partner Head Start always is, the oasis when there's something really, drastic going on in the community. But in order to do that, as we try to preface everything, you guys got to take care of yourselves too, and your staff. And, I put on my own Facebook something like, the only question we should be asking teachers during evaluations this year is, are you okay? Are you taking care of yourself? What can I do to support you? How can I help? Because as we're all going through too, having kids doing virtual learning often while trying to do your own job, or even, I have one kid who's trying to do virtual and one kid who's going to school, and but he's an active boy. And all the restrictions around COVID and not being able to move as much and he's 10, and not being able to touch people and not being able to yell and be, he comes home exhausted. So the staff are dealing with all of these kinds of kids with disabilities. I have kids with IEP, my own kids with IEPs, but we know for Head Start, the kids who aren't able to get services now, which is going to probably increase their delays. I mean, we have to just be honest about it. So I feel like Heather's saying, we're doing the best we can. It's not about, the federal government's not going to come and say, oh my God, you were 25% delayed or under enrolled. But what we care about is, how are you staying connected with your families? You're their lifeline. After other disasters, we've had stories of families that said the only person who got through to me was my Head Start family worker. I don't even know how she found me, but she did. She always knew my number and she always kept in touch with me and she kept me going, while I was moving to different shelters and things like that. So I think, supporting people to be that connection for our families as much as we can while taking care of ourselves and kind of letting go of, we're going to count attendance the way we usually do, and we're going to count enrollment the way we usually do. And then, I think in terms of like your budget and Heather, I mean, we know there are increased costs. I think even when you're serving fewer kids, you've got increased costs, and you'll be able to show how the pandemic is affecting what you need in terms of your budget, so that while you may not reach the traditional full enrollment, you are going to be able to more than expend your regular budget with the little COVID supplement that people got. So that's all, Heather, I think just totally consistent with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think that I've been just generally hearing some overall questions like, okay, so what about my budgets? Is there going to be additional funding available, operations money? Like, what does that look like for me? I would say right now, under the continuing resolution, we are good through December the 11th. And as you know, when we go under a continuing resolution, we fund our programs at the 50% level. So we are in the process of handling all the October and November grants now. December will be right around the corner, but they're only going to get half of their budgets as of right now for fiscal year 21 until we have a budget that's passed by Congress. Many of you are probably aware that the HEROES Act is still under discussion, that it does right now include language that would provide an additional $1.7 billion with a B dollars to Head Start programs. We have been talking about how to best approach, if that does come to fruition, how to handle the distribution of those funds. The way that the language is included in the act right now, it would be through a formula funding. So probably handled and distributed the same way in which we handled the CARES Act funding, which is based on your funded enrollment. So, but at this point, that's right now it's a potential. It's not a guarantee. So obviously, as Amanda was saying, that the best we can do right now is to talk with you about, if you've used all your CARES Act funding, tapping into, you can certainly use your existing operations budget to support those additional increased costs, but that you'll have to, at the end of the day, live within that budget that you've been awarded funds, because we don't anticipate any additional increases unless we do hear more movement on that HEROES Act. And the other thing too is it's been interesting to me to have conversations with grantees and some of the questions I get, and it's not just isolated to questions that I'm getting in Region 4. It's questions I've been hearing across the board coming in from some other states as well. But it seems like there may be some confusion around the COVID funds in general and the period of allowability for those funds. And I just want to make sure, because even if I say it now and you guys already know this, then so be it. But if I reach one person and it changes your understanding of how this works, then fantastic. Then I've done my job. But I will say, that the funds for the CARES Act funding, the COVID funds that all grantees received, those are do not expire in December. I think some people are under the impression that they will end in December, and that is absolutely not the case. In fact, the federal government had until September of 2021 to actually get them out to programs, which of course we did. So they're all out to you all now, but they took on the life of the project period in which your grant was awarded. So if you are still within your 5-year project period, and let's say that 5-year grant doesn't end until 2024, those funds are good for your under your existing grant through that period of time. The issue becomes is that if we awarded them under one budget period and that period has expired, you'll have to request a carryover funds to move the funds from one period to the next. But certainly you can continue to use your operations funds to support those expenses until you're actually able to move the funds from one period to the next. And then you can make an adjustment to apply those expenses to that COVID funding, so that 900 accounting number. But either way, that's still available to you. Now, let's say your project period ended in 2020, so that let's say you were you're a November grant and your budget or your grant ended and you got a new grant as of November 1. So that COVID money, if you didn't spend all of it prior to the end of that old grant, you can't carry over money from one grant to the next. But what we can do is you can ask for, if you still have unobligated money from the COVID funds left on your old grant, you can write into us through HSES correspondence saying, hey, I need a no-cost extension to be able to continue to use those funds on my old grant for the same purpose. And we will be more than happy to extend that grant and give you the time that you need, so that what you actually you technically have two grants that are operating at the same time. One that started November 1st, in that example, where you would be using your operations funds for ongoing service delivery, but then your old grant would still be, we would give you an extension for you to continue to obligate those COVID expenses to that old grant until those funds are gone, if that makes sense to folks. Yeah, so they definitely are good beyond December, and so I just wanted to clear up any confusion or misconceptions that were out there. I'm not really sure where that came about, but certainly you have access to those funds beyond December.
Okay, folks, we've got about 24 on here from all across the state of Kentucky. So this is your opportunity to ask questions and to seek clarification. So I want to go ahead and open that up. We've got a few questions from our survey, but I'll save those. The floor is open.
Heather, this is Kristy from Paducah. So I know that this question is completely premature, but our next policy council meeting is when we start planning our budget for our next school year. So as we plan, obviously we're still in a COVID pandemic. Has there been any discussion on extensions of our classroom enrollments with ensuring that we're fully enrolled? I mean, we are not right now. And so that is, we have a virtual and we have in-person classrooms, and it's working out great. We do have a current waiting list as well for people to be in person. And, they're virtual, but they want to be in person. So as I prepare for policy council for our November and December meeting, I know that's going to come up. So any advice on what that looks like? Because we will start ramping up in January for next year and our recruitment.
Gosh, that seems like it's so far away. But no, I get it. You really have to be thinking in, the late winter, early spring about recruitment, enrollment, how you plan to deliver services, make sure you have the space that you need to serve the kids. And so I get it. it just always feels like it just creeps up on you so quickly. But thank you, Kristy. I will say that as of right now, I think we're looking at this point to get through the current year. There's going to be some continued discussion on even programs that were faced with under enrollment prior to COVID. Like if and when we unpause this situation, what do we do? You know, if a program continues to be under enrolled, chances are the reasons for the under enrollment are completely different now than they were last year when we put the pause on in March. So, you know, I can honestly say I don't know, because there hasn't really been. It's more thinking about what do we do. Like, I don't even think there's even a discussion on unpausing anything right now. But I think just, you know, thinking about what our approach will be if we go if we do that. Like, do we say at this point to ease the burden, or to, you know, just some internal discussions, like should we just take everybody off their under enrollment plans, just wipe the slate clean for everybody and start over, because it really doesn't make sense? Or do we just continue to let people, like, because in the system now, if you're under enrolled, it still continues to show under enrollment, even though you're, you know, you could be fully enrolled, you could be under enrolled, just because we pause the way that it's just displayed in the system. So, and I'm sure that adds to like that mental pressure that I think programs are facing if they see that, if they ended up in a situation where they were under enrolled prior to the pause. So all that to say is I don't think that we've really considered next year. I know that I think we're definitely just kind of saying for this year right now, I think we're going to probably remain paused, because there's just too many variables and too many unknowns for us to think about, especially without having any kind of vaccination or that safety piece, and I don't say call it safety, but just that precautionary piece that would give programs the sense that they could be in a better place to provide in-person service. I think it's just impossible. And until we get that, I don't even know that we would consider thinking differently.
Thank you. That was more the safety that I needed to hear to move forward to address it with Policy Council too.
Hey, Heather, this is Cindy Graves in Murray.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi. I want to back up to what you were talking about with the carryover on the COVID funds, because I've been in conversation with my program specialist in the last few days with that very same scenario. So we're just in year 2 of our 5-year project. And so her conversation with me had been about doing a no-cost extension, but did I hear you say we should be doing it as a carryover request instead?
Yeah,
so
if your project period, it's based on actual, and you would put in a carryover request under the current period. So
as a budget amendment?
Yep, as an amendment to the current period, and then you would add in on the 424A whatever you still have as unobligated monies from the COVID funds. You'd put that on your 424A.
So and this is very specific to us, but we actually we're September 1, and so we were awarded COVID in the previous year. So we've been trying to sort all this out with how much we still have left. So it's a carryover from last year into this year, correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah, and you may not actually be able to really get a handle on where your expenses are until you get those 425 reports to kind of confirm everything when we process that carryover.
Gotcha.
Hi, Heather. This is Kim Fithian. I'm from the OVEC program in Shelbyville, Kentucky. I just want to touch base. We're really trying to document, but we haven't got any of our sites in Jefferson up and running yet due to COVID-19. A lot of our renovations are halted. We're waiting on 1303s, a lot of different reasons. And we started out going to have 2 brand new policy councils. We got TNTAS out of Bowling Green, did the Zooms, trained us. But on both of those, we spent 2 full days doing that via Zoom. We did not have a lot of parents. I think we had 2 parents on each and maybe 2 community reps. I didn't feel comfortable electing officers because I didn't want those folks to feel like they had to take an office, even if they didn't want one. So we've just documented really well, and we continue to have monthly meetings. I've combined those, Jefferson and all my grants, into one council due to COVID-19. Is that going to be okay if I'm just rolling right on? And hopefully next month I will be able to elect officers, but right now I haven't been able to do that because I didn't want my new parents to feel, oh my goodness, I don't want to take an office. So am I okay? I'm just a little nervous about it. I just want to be sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are flexibilities that you should consider. And interestingly, there's a number of programs that I know that when they have multiple programs operating in multiple grants, they do a little, I don't want to call it consolidation, but sometimes they will think about different ways to maybe not necessarily have a policy council at the grant level, but more at the program level. So that way you're addressing business and that you have enough adequate representation to support and you get business done for all of your grants rather than having individual policy councils at each individual grant level. I think that makes it harder to do business. So, that might be something to consider too, and maybe not just even during COVID levels or COVID times, but, for ongoing operations in order for you to be able to do business. So, but that you would do it with the same folks and it may be having a certain number of representatives from each grant, depending on the size of the grant, but that it would be representative of the whole organization and all of your Head Start and Early Head Start programs.
Thank you. That helps me. I appreciate it.
Yep. And I actually, Kim, I know exactly who you are because I've been looking at your documents all morning.
Thank you. Thank you. Jason and I are very grateful that you are doing that. Very grateful. You've been a huge help to me. So I personally want to say thank you so much. Yep. And your movement, your ability to move forward in Jefferson County should not be hampered by us. So I'm rolling up my sleeves and I promise to get feedback later today. Oh, that's a best Christmas present ever. Thank you so much. Thank you. Jason will be thrilled. No problem.
One of the questions that I think we've gotten, there's sort of the trend that not only are programs under-enrolled having trouble with children, but also with staff and teachers, maybe having difficulties with recruitment on that side of the house. And so one of the questions came in basically asking, what about waivers for staff education requirements?
Great question. Amanda's probably like, how is Heather going to answer this one? In fact, maybe I should, how about this? I'll say from an operations perspective, I'm going to tell you that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to tell us the real story. But I will say that from an operations perspective, we do still have the ability to waive the teacher qualification requirements for preschool teachers. And so you would make sure that, that the individual has a minimum of a CDA that has not expired, that you've been able to go out and you can show that you've tried to recruit and you just haven't been successful in finding applicants who meet the educational requirements for a particular area, and that the individual is enrolled in coursework that is leading toward the meeting the minimum requirements for the position. All that to say that same benefit for a waiver is not applicable to teachers for infants and toddlers. But and maybe I should be quiet here and let Amanda talk, but normally my messaging has been that we understand and recognize that there are limitations to that. that sometimes, you know, I think it's just in some respects that if you have good folks that you think would be great teachers and they just don't meet the minimum requirements, that I think we still want to be able to serve children. Like, we certainly don't want to close classrooms because of a lack of staffing. That if you've got the right people, then certainly programs should consider putting, consider moving forward with hiring, making sure that you have the policies and procedures in place to support the decisions that you're making, that those individuals are in school or working toward meeting the minimum requirements for that position, and that you put all of that in place, and that you follow a plan, and that you're checking in periodically with those individuals, giving them all the support that they need to secure the requirements. And I would say that when you have all those pieces in place, that if you come upon a monitoring review or an event, and you're able to document and demonstrate that you made those decisions, and you're able to support why, and that you can give them a copy of the professional development plan, you can give them the documentation that the individual is enrolled in school, and all of those pieces, that I think the most you'll see in a review report is something to the effect of, it's an area of concern. And it's just a documentation that, yes, you have these issues in place. I don't think it would. Now, if you hire somebody and you don't see a professional development plan, and you're not checking in periodically with staff, if you're not able to give the documentation, then that's when you're going to see it potentially rise to an area of noncompliance. But I think we recognize and live in the reality that it's just not possible to always be able to hire and have people at the ready with those degree requirements when they walk in the door. So we want to, being reasonable people, I think we want to make sure that we give you the tools necessary to make the right decisions for your program. Now, you may have leadership that just says, no, I'm not even willing to risk an area of concern on a review report. It's not okay. And that's okay. I mean, that's what your leadership has decided, but we want to make sure that we message out kind of our position on that, and making sure that you considered all those factors before you move forward. But that I think that that's generally what I'll say about it, Amanda, and you go right ahead.
That I would say the same thing. That was a really good answer. We're in a pandemic. A lot of our teachers have health risks themselves and are scared. A lot of them have people at home they're caring for who may be at such high risk that they don't feel like it's safe for them to go to work, or they are trying to take care of young children at home and they can't get childcare. We're in a national crisis. That said, and Heather's right, the Office of Head Start doesn't have the power to waive statutory requirements, so we can't do that. But we're monitoring in a pandemic, so I would be not too worried about the paper that says the credential. I would be worried if I was a current director about making sure children are safe and that they're thriving, that staff have the on-site support that they need to be effective, that they know about classroom management, so that they're not yelling at kids, all day, or kind of not supporting their maximal development in this weird time. The IPD on the ECLKC, the individual professional development planning, you can go right there and make sure people sign up and complete really high quality content. They can get certificates for it. I would do that. I would look at if I was having trouble when I was a director, we hired parents and community members, and as substitutes, we paid them. And I know that you have to worry about the health stuff, but within reason of, having them be floaters while they get their CDA and then start on a career path. If you've got, you need 8 infant toddler teachers and you only have 4 who are qualified, I'd think about spacing them so that one of them is with her group of 4 in a class arrangement with another group of 4, maybe not. I wouldn't put them together. I'd spread them around, so you spread your experience around. I'd use my education manager. If I know a lot of people are worried about having extra staff in classrooms and trying to keep the pod, I would really consider having video cameras if I couldn't have my supervisors visiting rooms, so that you have the ability not to monitor in Big Brother, but to coach, to be able to identify what kinds of professional development will help people. And the CDA is a really good credential. It is linked with improved child outcomes, and people get a lot of really applied information. So getting them enrolled and working on it, actually, this is going to sound crazy, but in some ways, it's a time when you may be able to bring in people who are parents and other community members and really offer them a career path post-pandemic, that they can get started on this and acquire a credential and a degree. I know it's imperfect. It's a scary time and it's really hard. But my biggest advice is to make sure that you get people and provide them access to this incredible content we have on the ECLKC, and then do coaching through whatever and support through whatever means are best.
Thank you. Other questions, thoughts, comments?
John, this is Martina.
No, go ahead, Martina, Heather. Please. No, Martina.
Heather, I just have a follow-up. I'm with Gateway Community Action, and the discussion we just had in regards to staffing is one of the biggest concerns that I have right now. The issue that I'm having is that we have staff that have completed the CDA coursework, but due to COVID, they are unable to get the on-site observation completed. And so therefore they cannot take their exam at this point. So I have had discussions with my program specialist, and I uploaded a couple of PD plans in the correspondence tab on HSES, because it was my understanding that if I put an individual in that position, because I have not been able to recruit someone who meets that qualification, that would have to go through the program specialist and in the Office of Head Start for approval. Now, those have been submitted in the correspondence for some time, and I have not heard back on that. So my question to you is, if we have to make that decision at a grantee level to place individuals in that position that have not received their CDA certification at this point, but maybe who have had all of the coursework or are currently enrolled in the CDA program, do we still need to upload that into correspondence just as an FYI? Do we need to wait on an approval back from the Office of Head Start? So can you give me a little bit of guidance on that so that I know how to proceed in my program?
So, and just to clarify, are those preschool teachers that you're talking about, or are we talking about infant toddler?
Infant toddler.
So infant toddler, we don't have waiver authority, so you're not going to get a response from us. That whatever you send in is more of just an FYI, and so you would be making those decisions locally to hire in light of not having that. Now, what I will say is, I can't even imagine, like, if you do have staff that just are not able to complete the coursework because they can't do the observation, I can't even imagine letting someone go. I think that's a no-brainer. I think you'd want to keep them on until they're able to satisfy the requirements. And just like you said, keep that documentation in light of what our situation is and how you're operating, and just keeping that as an FYI. But yeah, you're not going to end up, the only programs that are going to get a formal response to us is ones that where we do have waiver authority, and those are for the preschool teachers.
But I will go to the council if the only thing, so they can't take the online assessment because they haven't had their observation. Is that what I understand?
That's correct.
Then I'm going to talk to the council too and see if there's, because I mean, and so I think you're clear too. I think put a FYI in HSES, you have staff who've completed all the hours of professional development and supervised experience and are just pending the assessment because they can't have observation during COVID. I mean, they can't. We're not sending extra people in rooms to do observations. So I'll talk to the council and see if they think there'd be any benefit to letting people temporarily having some kind of waiver for the observation, but I think you're in the clear. But I am interested in that problem and imagine there are other people in that category.
Okay, thank you so much.
So, I think one of the one of the follow-up things that people are struggling with is just the general staffing for, change in operations. And particularly around the Q&As that we sent out, since we didn't do an extension on the payment of wages and benefits to staff when programs are closed. The reason why we didn't do the extension is because really there is the expectation that our programs are open, whether it's open in a different way than what you previously have provided services. I think that's important to note. So one of the things that we just keep talking about, and I know that it still leaves it very vague and in your hands to make some of these decisions, but that ultimately, programs have to determine how and lay out a plan for how they plan to deliver services based on existing conditions. So that if you're in a position where you think, okay, we're going to, in a short-term time between now and the end of the calendar year, so now until the end of December, we think we're going to need additional folks. Maybe we're doing all remote services, but maybe in light of that, we don't need all of the staff that we would normally have if we were open for in-person services. So in that case, you may say, however, we anticipate opening in January for in-person services or moving more to gradually phased in-person services. You're probably not going to want to lay off or release individuals if you think in the short term there's going to be a potential to recall or a need to recall them, because if so, then you don't have the ability to do that once you release them. But on the other hand, if you think that you're going to end up delivering services remotely for an entire year, that's more long-term, then you really need to reassess what staffing levels you would need to continue to operate under that new design through the end of the year, and then make necessary adjustments. But I think in all cases, and I always feel like it's the broken record of Belinda always talking about documentation and making the decisions that you need at the time that you make them, is really just being thoughtful and document what your service delivery looks like, what the staffing levels you need to support, and then thinking about and making sure that it fits with that period, that allowability. And so I think that's really what we want people to focus in on, because ultimately it's still going to be your decision on how you handle this, but really making sure that whether you continue to keep folks on or whether you release them, that it's based on how you plan to operate, and that, and what the staffing levels you'll need to deliver those services, and that you can periodically check in and adjust as necessary. And I know that still leaves people in a gray area and unsure how they plan to do it. But I think if you find a way to systematically and periodically check in on how you want to continue to deliver services, I think that's a good way to kind of document that path forward.
Okay, folks, questions, comments? I know we've gotten an awful lot of information, and it has been very, trying to think of the right word, welcome. I think having that sort of guidance and that reassurance and everyone sort of hearing it together, I think is very important. So other questions that folks may have. We've got Amanda and Heather with us for about 15 more minutes. And I want to make sure that if you do have questions or concerns, that you're able to get those addressed.
Good afternoon. This is Tammy Cottle from Middle Kentucky. And I just wanted to speak about the fact that we, from the beginning of the year, have offered virtual services. And we are at this point continuing to do so. But however, the 4 counties that we serve, which is Breathitt, Lee, Wolfe, and Owsley, have been designated as red counties as far as COVID-19, meaning that from my understanding and from what I've read, that you're more likely to catch COVID-19 when your county is operating in the red. It means you have a specific number of cases per the number of people that live there, per the population. So what we've done at this point, in the beginning of the year, we actually had staff who were coming into the centers, our education staff, and providing services. They were still virtual, but they were coming into the classrooms and were able to utilize all of their materials and everything there being at the centers. Now, since these 4 counties are now in the red, the staff, we've had discussion with them, also with the policy council, board of directors, and my executive director. And we decided at this point that the staff will be working from home to provide the same virtual services that they've been offering at the center, which means they're doing their Google Classroom, they're doing their Zoom meetings, they're doing their Messenger, they're doing their phone conversations with their parents. But at this point, we have several bus drivers and monitors that have voiced concerns about meal delivery to the homes, since we've had so many cases in our little rural counties that we serve. So we have suspended meal delivery at this point, and those staff are currently laid off with a definite recall date. Right now, we've looked at November 12th, which is the day after Veterans Day, and we're just consistently monitoring the governor's recommendations, and also looking at this per county, because we're just doing it, per county, and not doing a total shutdown or a total, virtual services. But at this point, we're offering services to parents through food banks and, through LIHEAP, through EEFSP. And we're just trying to offer them different services in different locations where they can still receive the food service. But because we have several staff who are either at risk, in the high risk category themselves, or have family members who are in the high risk category and are very concerned about delivering the meals out to the homes. So I have been in contact with Tansy Gibson, my program specialist. Each time that we have an event like that happens, and it's happened 3 different times on 3 different occasions, and I have called her and also sent it to her through the correspondence on OHS, letting her know what we're doing. And, I understand that as grantees that we have to make the decisions that are best for our programs and for our staff and for our families. This has been a really tough decision for us, but with the number of cases that we have in the counties that we serve, it's really a frightful time for our staff to be delivering meals back and forth, and I totally understand that. So we're just going to keep monitoring that day by day, week by week. It's really hard to plan anything, past this week at this point, because the situation is so fluid. So we're just going to continue to do that and document and keep the regional office informed. And I'm just wondering, is that okay? Is what we're doing okay?
I think exactly what you just said is, really important. And it sounds like you guys are meeting consistently and preparing your documentation. And I think making those decisions, whether to continue to pay staff or to put them on unemployment, regardless of it, it sounds like you're meeting and documenting, and I think that's most important, because that will help support the decisions that you make, and it'll be the backup documentation if anyone comes in and questions or figures out, or they ask questions about how did you determine whether something was allowable or not. And I think that what you're doing is providing that documentation.
Thank you. That's what I needed to hear.
Hi, Heather. This is Jessica Coffie with Community Action Council in Lexington, Kentucky. I have a quick question. So I know we've been focused on a lot, while COVID is going, but I'm anticipating we will see the effects of COVID even after I don't know, the pandemic is up. Has there been any discussions on your level of how much grace we will be shown after the pandemic is over?
Well, it depends on what it is. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I think, no, in all honesty, we've been having regular conversations like, okay, what does this look like when it's all over? I mean, even when we were talking about the staff wages and benefits and whether we would do an extension beyond September 30th, like, okay, even when in June, when we extended it to September, in June and the beginning of July, we were having conversations, okay, now what? What's the next move? What's the next step? How are we thinking differently? What kind of additional flexibilities are we giving? I know right now, I don't anticipate further flexibilities being given on what we have done related to all of the administrative flexibilities. I know, like the abbreviated applications, the submission of audits, the delayed submission of audits, all of those things. I don't anticipate that. I know that Health and Human Services recalled theirs a lot earlier than we did. OHS still gave those flexibilities, and we put that in place through an information memorandum out to programs through, I think it runs through December 31st. So that's still in place now. I don't believe there's going to be flexibility beyond that time frame, or at least not that we're talking about it. But I think it lends a good point to be thinking about, and just as we kind of talking about with Kim's situation is, could or should we be thinking about how we just in general do business differently? So, are there activities and things that could be done more remotely in general that maybe we hadn't considered before? Are there different things that we could or should be thinking about? Like I said, maybe we redesign our policy council because it makes better sense to be able to really think about getting the business done, but being able to have that eyesight across all of our programs. There's just a whole multitude of areas where we could be thinking about, our programs could be thinking about just different ways of doing business in light of what we've all experienced now, and certainly taking advantage of that. But yeah, I mean, certainly we are thinking about, the what happens afterward. And certainly we want to give, if we do end up lifting flexibilities or saying, like I'm thinking about the full enrollment initiative, if we unpause it, we're certainly going to give programs, adequate notice and, substantial preparation to understand, like, okay, this is coming. This is, we now are feeling like we're in a good position where we're past this pandemic piece and we can deliver services in a more meaningful way. And so I think with that, we'll talk about and give programs adequate notice. Now, whether we all agree on what's adequate or not, that's always the key. Some programs or some may or may not agree, but certainly we would definitely welcome your input and feedback. And I'm always open to hearing from programs as well. I wasn't sure, Jessica, if you had anything in particular in mind, or you just thinking about in general everything that's been laid out?
Just in general, everything that's been laid out, not necessarily the applications, but just thinking about our staffing and enrollment, and just once children get back in school, I don't know. This has been a different year.
I think there's so much that is unknown still. It seems like we're going to head into a pretty bad time over the next few weeks, and that you have to be thoughtful in planning, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen or even close, let alone exactly. And that's really stressful. Some of the things I've been thinking about are that more children are entering deep poverty than before. Many children who would have been identified as needing special education and related services as part of their Head Start enrollment are not going to get identified. Other children who get evaluated aren't going to be able to get services. I think we're going to see, we know there have been increasing situations of domestic violence and other kinds of trauma because of poverty and because of pandemic, and because it's one thing for those, I get to work from my home and be safe, and a lot of our families are working in meat packing plants and food service and transportation that's considered essential, and they don't get paid. They're very high risk often and still needing to work. It's very hard on families. So I think part of the long-term planning is going to be maybe a generation of children who are going to have been in deeper poverty with less available services. So, you know, how are we going to think about that? And really in the future, I think some of what Head Start's never been able to enroll all of the eligible children. How are we going to make sure the children that we do enroll are the really highest need kids in our communities? You know, and that we're helping the kids who are also high need, but slightly less high need getting to pre-K or childcare or other places so they get help too, but really being able to recruit and select those highest need families and try to provide them with comprehensive services going forward is going to be more important probably than it's been to me since our inception. So that's some of what I think about in addition to all of the other kinds of planning.
Hi, Heather. This is Sharon Price from Lexington. While we're talking about flexibilities and being creative in delivering the services, we have a different consideration that I'd like to run past you. Currently, we have about 119 of our teachers who are on the emergency family leave. And I wanted to ask you guys, because of course, you know, we're going to run into all of those other roadblocks that everybody has been talking about if we have our teachers out on leave where we can't come back or they can't come back. Is the Office of Head Start allowing the flexibility for the Head Start staff to be paid to take care of the Head Start teachers' children so the Head Start teachers can come back into the classroom and provide services for the families and children in our communities? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think that goes back to thinking about how we are responding to COVID. So, you know, some things that programs do or may consider doing right now based on, because basically you're talking about providing childcare, providing, you know, school age care for children of teachers in order for your program to operate.
Yes.
So, yeah, so basically, I think that under normal circumstances, we would say that would not be allowable because that is not something that we would be able to, that we would normally consider under operations. But in light of COVID, if you really don't have the staff, if you have an inadequate wait list of children that are really looking to come back, and really the only barrier to you being able to provide services is really the fact that your teaching staff don't have adequate childcare in order to do that, then certainly I would say that's one of those things that, you know, programs need to think about, consider, and document. I mean, that's the piece that, you know, I think Belinda we've been getting a lot of these questions like, would it be allowable? Well, it really depends on your situation, looking at your staffing, figuring out what the issues are, what the barriers are for delivering services. And if that's the case, then maybe that's something that you would use your COVID funds for. That would say, like, in light of COVID, we need to make an adjustment and we need to be able to do this in order to serve children. We need to be able to provide like a short-term childcare program for our teaching staff, so that way that frees them up in order to be able to deliver Head Start and early Head Start services. So, I mean, I think that the answer, you know, even a year or two ago would have been no, but now, in light of where we're at, I think it's a matter of having the discussions, you know, making sure you have documentation and making sure that the decision is based on what's allowable, necessary, and reasonable for operations.
I heard of a program that did that. I'm not sure that they used Head Start funds, but they surveyed all their staff and they learned that they didn't have enough staff returning relative to the number of enrolled parents who wanted their kids to get on-site services. So they and they asked the staff why, and they large majority were because they didn't have care for their own children. And so the program hired kind of like supervisors, and they set up outdoor classroom space. It's in California, big tents with sides that could be up or down, and lots of tables and the technology connections so that the kids of staff could be there doing and get supervised while doing their online learning, which believe me is necessary, the supervision. They don't do it if you're not watching. And you know, they could have meals, and they could have socially distant recess with their masks and everything, and it really worked well. So I think that was an innovation. I heard great innovations while I was listening to some of the regional office staff talk about things they did. So I definitely think that's valid. And a lot of times people will say, well, they can't do it outside all the time, but actually it's been said that there is no bad weather, just bad clothing. Of course, that bars, you know, hurricanes and, you know, natural disasters, fires, things that cause air quality problems or extreme cold. But a lot of many days, kids can be outside even when it's not perfect with the right clothing.
Well, folks, we are at 1 o'clock. And like I said, I promised Heather that we wouldn't take up any more than about 60 minutes of her time. I know that she and Amanda would be welcoming of any questions that you may have. I think everyone has their contact information, but if it's okay with you guys, I'll share it around with everyone just so that they have it.
Sure.
We will make this recording available so that folks can go back. I know that a lot of us were engaged in sort of listening and thinking through it rather than writing things down. So you can go back and take a look at it that way. And again, if there's any other questions or comments that you have, please let me know. Please let Amanda and Heather know. And I know that folks will be able to respond quickly. So with that, I just want to say on behalf of everyone, thank you so very much for taking time out of your day to visit with us. Not only are we busy, but we know that you all are incredibly busy and struggling to answer these questions, not just for Kentucky, but for all the other states and programs around the country. So I'll turn it back to Kristy to see if she has any closing comments. But other than that, I just want to thank you so very much for making time and doing so on such short notice. So Amanda, Heather, thanks to you both.
I don't have any closing thoughts. Just thank you as well. I appreciate your time, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day and a great week.
Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Thank you so very much. See everybody later.
Yep. Take care.